Some stories never vanished completely. They were buried, silenced, preserved only because no one knew what to do with them. Among these forbidden fragments lies an account found in the deserts of Upper Egypt, a manuscript kept for nearly 2,000 years, describing a vision that was never meant to be revealed. The origin of the rupture, the descent of wisdom, and the reason why light seems to sleep within the human being. The text claims that this fracture did not begin with human rebellion, but long before, when a solitary gesture opened the way for an imperfect world to emerge. From that gesture came a craftsman who shaped creation without understanding the source from which he himself arose. Surrounded by forces that imitated authority and upheld an order built upon absence rather than origin. And while this world was taking shape, another presence descended in silence, not to destroy what had been formed, but to restore it from within. Thus a spark was hidden in the human soul, not as a spiritual ornament, but as memory. The only thing capable of piercing the forgetting the world tries to impose. Nothing in this manuscript sounds like punishment. Everything points to process, passage, reorientation. The fall, contrary to what has long been believed, may never have been a fall at all, but a transition. Why was this story concealed? Why did it remain silent for so many centuries? And what does it reveal about the light that continues to breathe even in the depths of matter? The pages found in the desert do not explain the mystery. They reopen it. And they lead whoever reads them to the threshold of a revelation that has been waiting all along. It is through this doorway that we begin to walk. An ancient doorway, opening once more here, in the Valley of Redemption. The desert has always guarded the secrets the world wished to forget. Its dunes move like curtains, covering and uncovering fragments of stories that were never meant to return to the surface. Yet, there are moments when the silence of the desert falters, and what should have remained buried rises with the force of a memory that refuses to die. It happened in Upper Egypt, when a clay jar shattered and revealed pages far too intact for the abandonment in which they were found, as though time itself had been prevented from touching them. At first glance, nothing seemed extraordinary. Yellowed, fragile sheets, written by anonymous hands. But their contents did not appear to belong to the same world that had guarded them. They were not accounts of kings nor parables of morality. They were echoes of a reconstruction of reality. A narrative suggesting that the world in its current form was not born full, nor balanced, nor aligned with its true origin. It would have emerged through the solitary act of a consciousness which, by acting alone, opened a fissure between what should have been and what it ultimately became. Such an idea placed the manuscript immediately within forbidden territory. It did not portray humanity as the cause of the primordial rupture. It spoke neither of human failure nor of ancestral rebellion. It spoke of an incompleteness older than humanity itself, a disturbance that gave rise to a world functional yet spiritually fractured, a world that imitated its origin without understanding it, a world born not from fullness, but from absence. The manuscript claimed that in the face of this rupture, an ancient wisdom descended into creation, not to undo it, but to restore it from within. And here the text becomes disturbing. This restoration did not take place in the structures of the cosmos, but in human consciousness itself. Humanity, it said, received a silent fragment of this wisdom, an inner seed, hidden so deeply that no external force could remove it. The human being, according to the manuscript, was not born condemned. It was born necessary. It carried within itself the only answer capable of realigning what had been shaped in incomprehension. This concept changed everything. If creation was the consequence of an initial imbalance, and if wisdom sought to repair it through human consciousness, then the story of humanity ceased to be a record of guilt and became a process of remembrance. The inner spark, hidden, silent, resilient, would be the secret map placed within each person. A folded, sealed map, revealed only when the surface of existence began to crack. The text suggested that this spark speaks through discomfort, through unease, through the deep silence that sometimes weighs upon the soul. Every feeling of strangeness, every inexplicable intuition, every question that defies the obvious would be the attempt of this inner light to move, to remember, to return to the origin that matter tried to imprison. That is why the manuscript remained hidden for nearly 2 millennia. Not because it was irrelevant, but because it spoke of something that could not be tamed. It suggested that the reality accepted as stable is, in truth, an imperfect construction, that suffering is not punishment, but symptom, that the human soul is not lost, but carrying a memory it has not yet learned to decipher. The broken jar did not merely reveal an ancient document. It revealed a threat to the comfort of easy explanations. It revealed that the world may not be the final point, but an interval that only makes sense when the inner spark begins to awaken. The desert tried to bury this story and failed, because some truths do not disappear. They simply wait for someone to find them again. Between the lines of the manuscript, an unsettling figure emerged. Not a monster, nor a classic antagonist, but something far more disturbing. A creator who did not know his own origin. The text described him as a craftsman who shaped the world with strength, but without understanding. He believed himself absolute because he could perceive nothing beyond himself. And it was this blindness that became the silent foundation of the reality we know. This craftsman was not malicious by intention. He was limited by nature. The creation that emerged from his hands carried his mark. Order without depth, structure without purpose, form without memory. The world took shape as an incomplete replica of something greater, solid in appearance, yet fragile at its core. Every layer of reality reflected this limitation, as though the universe had been built from a cracked mold. The manuscript also described the forces surrounding this craftsman. They were not demons in the traditional sense, but authorities formed from the same lack of understanding. They were echoes of the original blindness, repeating patterns, reinforcing a structure that needed to appear absolute in order to conceal its imbalance. They were powers that imitated order yet lacked the origin required to sustain it. Thus, they created systems that governed through appearance, never through truth. Under their dominion, reality became stable only on the surface. Beneath it remained emptiness, a silence that would not fill, a discomfort that never entirely faded. The manuscript suggested that this universal unease was not human failure, but a symptom of the world itself. Where the craftsman perceived perfection, there was deficiency. Where he perceived authority, there was isolation. Where he perceived completeness, there was absence. Humanity was born within this structure and therefore shares much of its tension. The deep restlessness that follows the human being from the beginning is not weakness, but residue. A residue that the world we inhabit is not the definitive reflection of the origin, but an intermediate stage, an unfinished attempt to imitate something the craftsman could not comprehend. This idea appeared in the manuscript almost with clinical clarity. Imperfection was not the result of rebellion, but of ignorance. And for that reason, it could not be corrected by external force. Creation, shaped by blind hands, could only be restored if it received from within a light capable of seeing what the craftsman could not. It is at this point that the text began to shift in tone. The presence of wisdom, hidden, silent, attentive, emerged as the answer. Not to destroy the craftsman, for he was no enemy, but to repair the consequences of his lack of understanding. The manuscript implied that combating darkness would be futile. One must illuminate the root of forgetting. Thus, the world's imperfection was not a curse, but an opportunity. The emptiness running through human experience was not punishment, but sign. Every flaw in reality, every rupture, every feeling of inadequacy became, in the manuscript's reading, an involuntary reminder of the original imbalance. And if the world was born in blindness, it would be only through vision, true vision, the kind that awakens from within, that it could begin to realign. The narrative closed this section with an implicit and unsettling assertion. Creation is not static. It waits. It waits for the moment when what was shaped in absence finally encounters the presence that came before it. If the manuscript described the craftsman as the origin of incompleteness, it described wisdom as the response. She did not appear as a force of confrontation, nor as a triumphant being descending in glory. Her action was almost invisible, and precisely for that reason, decisive. While the craftsman shaped the world believing he had finished his work, wisdom observed the fissure opening between what had been created and what should have been. And she chose to intervene, not to destroy, but to correct. Her descent, according to the text, caused no uproar. There were no flashes, no extraordinary manifestations. Wisdom entered creation in the only way capable of crossing a structure built in ignorance, silently. It was as though she understood that any grand gesture would be perceived by the craftsman as a threat, reinforcing his blindness even more. For this reason, her action needed to be discreet, a restoration born first within consciousness rather than within matter. Wisdom descended out of compassion, not fragile or sentimental compassion, but structural compassion. The kind that sees where the pain began and attempts to reorient the foundation. She saw that the craftsman had created a functional world, yet empty, organized yet disconnected from its origin. She saw that the beings formed there would grow without memory, believing the limits of reality to be all that existed. The intervention did not need to destroy, but to reorient, to place within creation something that would remember, something that would point, something that would resist forgetting. Thus emerged the inner seed, a silent fragment placed at the center of human consciousness. It was not energy, nor symbol, nor metaphor. It was testimony, a microcosm of the true origin left inside a world shaped without vision. This seed carried the task of illuminating from within what remained opaque from without. And so, it was placed where no imitative power could reach it. According to the manuscript, this seed does not act suddenly. It pulses. It stirs in moments of silence, of deep pain, of involuntary recognition. It does not appear as an immediate answer, but as an intuition that there is something greater than the surface allows one to see. Every human restlessness, every search, every question, every sense of not belonging would be the effect of this seed attempting to reach consciousness. Wisdom knew that to restore a blind creation, vision needed to be introduced where the craftsman had placed only form. And for that, she chose the most vulnerable and paradoxically, the most resilient place, the human interior. The seed became part of the very structure of experience, not as an intruder, but as a remembrance. Yet that remembrance was not clear. It was a dormant memory that needed awakening. And here the manuscript approaches what is most unsettling in the human condition. The constant sense that something is missing, that there is an origin we cannot name, that life touches a boundary it cannot explain. The text interprets this sensation not as weakness, but as calling. A calling that does not come from the world, but from within. Wisdom did not correct creation by removing the craftsman from control. She corrected it by placing within the creature a point of return. A kind of spiritual compass that never aligns with the visible world because it was not born from it. It points to something prior, something the craftsman did not know. And it is precisely this unawareness that makes the seed the key to restoration. With this, the manuscript implies that the human being carries a double trajectory: to live in the world shaped by blindness, and, at the same time, to carry within the memory left by wisdom. Between these two forces, form and remembrance, limit and depth, the spiritual drama of humanity is born. And wisdom knew that sooner or later, this tension would awaken. Every silent descent is destined for an inevitable awakening. If wisdom descended to plant memory, the craftsman responded by constructing forgetting. It was inevitable. The manuscript described this reaction not as open war, but as the instinctive defense of someone who sensed, without understanding, that there was something within creation that did not come from his hands. He did not know what the inner seed was, only that he could not control it. And everything he could not govern had to be concealed. The response took the form of a structure the text called the veil. It was not a physical barrier, not magical, not material. It was perceptual. The veil functioned as a layer over consciousness, a mist that erased depth and left only the surface visible. It was like looking at a lake and never perceiving the existence of the depths. Reality appeared complete, even when its most essential part was missing. This veil began to manifest across every dimension of human existence. It made life appear confined to its limits. It made suffering seem final. It made matter appear absolute. And above all, it made consciousness believe that its origin lay outside, never within. The web of forgetting perpetuated the illusion that everything the human being sought had to be found beyond oneself, never at the point where the inner seed rested. The text said this web was reinforced by systems created to sustain the appearance of order, structures of authority, social patterns, narratives repeated generation after generation. None of this was inherently malicious, yet everything carried the same function: to keep consciousness distracted from depth. The web did not destroy. It diverted. It filled the world with noise so that silence, the only place where the seed could be heard, would be forgotten. The Craftsman and his imitative authorities reinforced this construction constantly. They did not fear humanity for its strength, but for its potential. If even a single human consciousness pierced the veil and perceived the seed placed there by wisdom, the entire structure of imitation would lose its meaning. And structures sustained by appearance cannot survive when confronted by truth. For this reason, the web of forgetting grew so refined. It did not need to prevent remembrance, only delay it. It merely had to occupy the mind with the weight of daily life, with paralyzing fears, with desires that promise fulfillment but never satisfy. It needed only to build a world where the superficial seemed sufficient, where depth was dismissed as delusion, where the search for origin was replaced by the search for distractions. Yet despite all this effort, the manuscript claimed that the veil was never perfect. It could weaken, it could tear, and its fractures always appeared in the same places, in intense pain, in losses that dismantle illusions, in experiences of absolute silence, in that mysterious sensation that the soul is trying to say something the mind cannot translate. The veil trembled whenever life grew too vast to fit upon the surface. These cracks were proof that the inner seed remained active. It was the seed pushing the human being into restlessness, generating questions the world could not answer, producing that sense that something lies behind appearances, not as fantasy, but as forgotten memory. The manuscript was clear. The central struggle of humanity is not between good and evil, nor between light and darkness, but between remembering and forgetting. Wisdom planted the spark. The craftsman wove the veil, and it is in the space between these two movements that the human drama unfolds. The veil is strong because it leans upon habit, but the seed is stronger because it leans upon origin. And sooner or later, what comes from origin begins to move again. The manuscript claimed that the first breach in the veil does not arise from strength, but from restlessness. The inner seed does not reveal itself with a burst. It begins as a subtle discomfort, a sense that something does not fully fit upon the surface of existence. It is an almost imperceptible shift, as though the soul were taking a deep breath for the first time after a long forgetting. This awakening does not illuminate immediately. It destabilizes. According to the text, every awakening begins in fracture, in the pain that breaks routines, in the silence that exposes emptiness, in the loss that dismantles certainties. Not because pain is sacred, but because it makes it impossible to uphold illusions. Where life loses its artificial layers, the seed finds space to pulse. And when it pulses, reality changes its texture. What once seemed solid begins to reveal cracks. What once seemed absolute begins to feel insufficient. The manuscript describes this phase as a voiceless calling. Nothing external changes, but the gaze changes. The person begins to perceive meaning where once they saw only chance. They begin to notice that certain inner impulses are not desires, but memories. Intuitions become frequent, questions become unavoidable, and the sense of displacement, once uncomfortable, gains depth. It is no longer weakness. It is a sign. It is then that the web of forgetting loses its effectiveness. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer convinces. The soul that awakens feels the weight of the world, yet perceives that this weight is not absolute. There is something behind it, something moving in the opposite direction. A calling inward, never outward. At this stage, consciousness becomes a territory of conflict. On one side, the veil insisting on keeping everything shallow. On the other, the inner seed insisting on revealing depth. And the manuscript states that whenever this tension arises, the advantage belongs to the seed. For the veil depends on repetition. Memory depends on origin. Awakening, then, is not receiving a complete revelation, but recognizing the existence of something that has always been there. It is the beginning of a return that unfolds not through steps, but through perception. Creation may have been born of blindness, but remembrance is always born of light. The manuscript claimed that no return begins in the external world. There are no portals, no signs in the heavens, no visible ruptures. The process is internal, silent, almost imperceptible, and yet capable of altering everything. The seed planted by wisdom does not awaken to lead the human being out of creation, but to allow them to see through it. True return is not escape, it is perception. According to the text, when memory begins to move, reality does not dissolve, but it loses the power to define completely what a person is. The world shaped by blindness continues to exist, yet it ceases to be absolute. One begins to see that their pains do not diminish them. They reveal depth, that their limits are not defeats, they are frontiers to be crossed, and that the absence which always felt like punishment was, in truth, invitation. The return is gradual. It does not occur through grand visions, but through subtle realignments. The willingness to hear silence, the impulse to question the obvious, the ability to perceive beauty where once there was only routine. Each inner movement reveals another fragment of origin. Each flicker of clarity weakens the web of forgetting. The person begins to recognize a pattern the manuscript describes as light remembering itself. The text stated that when consciousness recognizes its own depth, the craftsman loses power. Not because he is confronted, but because the illusion that sustains him is no longer sufficient. Creation does not turn against its maker. It merely ceases to depend on him. And in this moment occurs what the manuscript calls inner ascension. Not a rising out of the world, but the restoration of a perception the world tried to erase. Wisdom, who once descended to plant memory, now rises through those who awaken. The return, therefore, is neither geographical nor mystical movement. It is recognition. The human being sees themselves not as a lost creature, but as bearer of the spark intended to restore what was born incomplete. The end of forgetting is not glory. It is clarity, and clarity, once reached, can never be taken away. The manuscript did not describe a fall, but a path. The inner seed, placed in silence, awakens when the veil breaks from within. And every consciousness that remembers dissolves one fragment of the ancient blindness. The return does not occur in the heavens, but in perception. For creation may have been born incomplete, but remembrance never was.